Welcome to Instagram Live with Dr. Buzz. Thank you for joining me. If you're on the East Coast, I hope I'm not interrupting your dinner. And if you're on the West Coast, you better be meal prepping for your dinner because that means you're following my directives, right? So we have a lot to discuss. Tonight's topic has to do with mental health and mental illness and the relationship to the gut. Have you seen on a number of my posts, I've been really pushing gut health. I mean, like crazy, trying to get people to not only appreciate gut health, but to become ambassadors of the science behind gut health. As you know, in functional medicine and integrative healthcare, we talk about it being the first brain, and your second brain is the brain that everyone knows to be the brain. And I'm going to discuss some of this. What I first want to suggest is, I'm a certified integrative health practitioner, and I also have a doctorate in psychology, but this is not a critique of any particular science, whether it's psychology or whether it's functional or integrative healthcare. I'm giving everyone a perspective to understand in the world of integrative and functional health, ways of looking at precursors that drive dysfunction. So let me give you an example, because this is not my goal right now in describing this is definitely not to challenge anyone's science. I'm giving you another way of looking at the brain, looking at the way stress affects the brain, looking at what we term as mental illness, look at what we call behavioral health, and then just draw the connection to the gut. And I'm not trying to sell the gut on this idea either. What I'm trying to do, if you're a clinician and you're watching, I'm trying to broaden everyone's toolbox. If you're a client, a patient, a person who you think may be ill, or a person who's suffering, these are ideas for you to invest in. So you look them up and you research and you educate yourself. The goal is to learn more, and I use the word ambassador, so become the ambassador. You become the master of creating pathways of getting people well. So in integrative healthcare, we focus on wellness, we focus on immunity, and we focus on resilience. I mean, we try to build people to be strong. And if you have a strong gut, you have a greater chance, and this is to everybody's knowledge, we all know that if you have a strong gut, you have a greater chance of surviving, of thriving, of beating, of conquering, and of even avoiding different types of illnesses. And I don't want this workshop, this narrative tonight to be a replacement for anyone getting the help that they need. Because if you do think you're sick, you want to go to your primary care physician. If you find yourself suffering anxiety, depression, or things that are in the world of mental health or mental illness, which we're going to define some of that in a functional, integrative way, I just want you to make sure that you are locating and accessing the people that you need to get the help that you need. With that being said, in what I call functional and integrative behavioral health, that is my wheelhouse. That's what I do. I'm looking at the precursors that are driving anxiety, that are driving depression. The big one, is really stress. Everyone calls me the stress doctor. But I'm also looking at what people see or term as, bipolar, or a fluctuating, or what we call labile mood, etc. So I've always invested my time in really trying to understand the functionality of what's going on. And when we're looking at the brain and we look at the definitions that line up to that, we have coined these words of mental health. And it's interesting because a dear friend of mine, who many of you may even follow, Dr. Daniel Amen, such a smart, bright guy. He's doing a fantastic job educating the world in functional medicine and neuroscience. And even certified in his neuroscience. It's interesting that we use as many tools as we think we need to really call what we feel is, in fact, that precursor. Precursor meaning What was the initial insult that started a whole string of either other insults or symptoms to follow? When we use the word mental, commonly, historically, mental meant like cerebral, cognitive, in your thinking part of your brain. And when we talk about health, we talk about wellness. So is it thinking wellness? Is it thinking health? Is it cognitive health? And the word psychology comes into all that, right? So we talk about, in the field of psychology, we talk about your brain's interpretation of different signals and how we respond or react to that. So the difference in the world of integrative and functional behavioral health, we really look at Daniel Amen's model of basically brain health. We look at the functionalities that's causing a disturbance, and then what is that disturbance? So what is the intrusion? What is the insult? And then we recognize that there is an insult because we suffer symptoms. So I've coined this line that I think is just so meaningful and responsible, which is listen to what your body's trying to tell you. So when we have behavioral health issues, they're typically manifestations from these precursors. So let me go through all the vernacular. Ready? So mental. So when we talk mental, and this is not a challenge of the existing definitions, I'm giving you the functional and integrated way of looking at things. We're looking at the cerebral part of the brain, the cortical part in the world of interpretation, where we take information in. And then when we look at the word health, we're talking about wellness. When we talk mental health, we're talking about the wellness of that cerebral, cortical, or cognitive part of brain function. Then we look at the words mental illness. And then we do the opposite. We say, hey, instead of it being mental health, mentally well, they're mentally ill. So there is a disease or sickness that's affecting the body or the mind. This right now should make absolute sense to you because we are so quick to say, this guy has got mental health problems. This guy is anxious. We don't say commonly, if you notice our language and notice the poignancy of how quick we are to diagnose somebody with or without a license or certification to do so. We'll say, that guy, you see the reactions on that guy? He's clearly bipolar. This bipolar guy was at the theme park, standing in line, losing his mind. So we use the word mind. He's losing it, which means he's lost efficacy. So it's no longer available to him, or it's not satisfactory, or he can't rely on it. When we think mental illness, and you think about the illness being the disease, and you think the mental part in that cortical cerebral area, region of the brain, so that's the top part, that thinking part really doesn't typically have a whole heck of a lot to do with where we really see mental illness when we use even SPECT imaging of the brain, or we use different types of Ayurvedic medicine or investigation or assessments. We are typically looking in the inside, the deeper region of the brain called the subcortical. So you have the cortical on the outside, and deep down is the subcortical, where we find your limbic system, where we find your autonomic nervous system, where we find your basal ganglia, your anterior cingulate cortex. Areas of the brain that drive worry. Where if you didn't have worry, you wouldn't be cautious. So we're all supposed to worry. So if we're all supposed to be worriers, because that's what allows us to be cautious, do we all suffer mental illness? And the answer to any clinician would be no, because in order to be coined or determined as being diagnosable, the symptoms that we suffer have to grossly affect or impair our ability to function. So this is where it gets so complicated for me, which is why I went into integrative and functional health, because I just wanted to know what the heck is the problem? Like, what is the main thing that's going on right now that's driving all this? So with brain health, we really are looking at function in integrative science. And what I love about that, which includes neuroscience, is we then can, because we're looking at functionality, we can look at other functions of the body and see how they're functioning together. So we don't have to coin one part of the body as being ill. We don't have to say the mental part of the person is ill. Now, here's the way the string of, or we call the sequence of effects work. Ready? So we have an antecedent, which could be a stressor. We have the behavior, which could be the reaction. And then we have C. So antecedent, behavior, and C is the consequence. A plus B equals C. When you look at functional and integrative science, there's always an A and a B and a C. But when we look at just symptoms, we don't always necessarily take into account the antecedent. We're commonly, and I've done this for years, I was commonly looking at the symptoms saying, what do we do? We're going immediately to C. What is our reaction or response to fixing B? Like to fix this behavioral reaction, these behavioral symptoms. And in functional, we go back to A. So that's what kind of makes it cool, right? So I'm trying to divide this up right now in a responsible way so everyone can kind of get a grip, because I have so many emails. I get so many people reaching out to me saying, could you help me, or help my son, or I have a cousin, a coworker. I have a boss, who's a mess, and, please come save us, and come save him. And 9 times out of 10, it is a non-professional diagnosis of anxiety or depression or bipolar. That's what I typically hear. And when I go in there and we use our functional tools, we find out it's all kinds of other stuff. And it could be in the brain. It could be. I'll give you a great example. Right now, I just got a lot of labs back from different people. I run orthomolecular labs. They're fantastic to figure out what's going on in people's bodies. I mean, fantastic. From cortisol levels, vitamins, minerals, nutrient values, oxidative stress markers, yeast fungus markers, you name it. It's just really, really cool stuff. And I've been doing it for a long time. But, I have somebody right now who's acting very mentally ill, but we found that there's just this brain full of mold, and we can get the mold out. So there's all kinds of naturopathy tools that we have that will take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, or if could take longer, could take up to a year, but we'll get that stuff out of this person. But the person's already been on like 5 or 6 or 8 meds, psychiatric medications, and it is what it is. You start asking yourself, why didn't anyone look to see if there was mold? When I heard the symptoms, first thing I thought was mold. And there could still be a unrelated illness with psychiatric symptoms that have nothing to do with the mold. So we want to remediate as many things as we can, which is why I came up with Dr. Buzz's 7 buckets: biological, psychological, social, spiritual, functional, structural, occupational, insults to the body, the gut, the brain. So when we talk about the gut, as we're relating this to the brain, what I want everyone to focus on is precursors right now. Like, what am I doing? What has happened to me in the past that could have led to these experiences that I have? Experience could be behavioral manifestations. Example, person is anxious, so they're in a group of other people, so they leave the party. So what is the behavior? They left. They didn't even tell anybody. They just walked out. But what was the precursor? Precursor was they were feeling anxious. They were feeling worried. They were feeling like their air passage was blocking off. They had racing negative thoughts. They started feeling suspicious, whatever that could be. So the precursor could be thought of as functions of the body, or when people look at behavioral health or applied behavioral analysis, somebody might say the precursor was there were just too many people. So the precursor was more of a structural issue than it was necessarily an anatomical issue. So this is why I always say we all have to respect everyone's interpretation of the situation. It also leads to the credence that when you are an integrative professional, I'm also a certified social worker. As a social worker, we're always bringing all these parties together. So if you're a clinician watching me, this is why we're always supposed to talk. This is why I get a hold of everybody. You get all these emails from me saying, hey, doctor, hey, social worker, hey, clinician, let's talk about this client that we share, because my precursor could be defined different than someone else's precursor, depending on your discipline. So let's continue with that connection to the gut, because the precursor could be in the gut. But a lot of people struggle, like, how do you know how to measure the gut? So I'm the orthomolecular lab guy. I also have a couple doctors I work very closely with who do blood work. I wouldn't say for me, but for the clients, I refer to them. And as a multidisciplinary team, we work together to heal our client. That blood work is extremely, extremely helpful. And we compare it to our orthomolecular labs. An example of an orthomolecular lab could be the organic acid test. Has 76 biomarkers, which is absolutely fascinating, amazing. And we can look at the gut and see how it's aligned and if the bacteria is balanced and good bacteria versus bad. If there's any dysbiosis or any type of infection to the gut, and if there's yeast, and if there's yeast, is it overgrown? Is it fermented and overly fermenting? And does it have yeast markers? And does it look like it's traveling, through the GI tract? And how far into the tract is it? And what is it doing to the tract? And is this person at risk for having other types of illnesses that could come from these types of infections or overgrowths? And super, super cool and impressive. So when we're looking at the gut, we're looking at a community that is the housing of a lot of different functionality. Where I'm tying it into mental health, mental illness, or we're going to call brain health moving forward. So I want to package this. Mental health, your cortical wellness. Mental illness, your cortical sickness. But what I'm telling you is that, suspicion, anxiety, worry, people who can't regulate their mood or emotion from one gear to the next is in the deep, what we call subcortical part of the brain. So it's really not in the cortical area. So let's just call it the brain. So for the purposes even of Daniel Amen, out of respect for you, sir, we're going to call it brain health. So thank you for creating, that vernacular for what I'm trying to describe. In your brain health, how do we tie that to your gut? Well, 75% of the neurotransmitters that are in your brain come from the gut. So let's just use serotonin. We have serotonin, GABA, dopamine. We have a ton of these that are manufactured somewhere in the gut. They have to travel up through the spine. They got to break through the blood-brain barrier, and then they make it into the brain. When when a doctor is giving medication, psychiatric medication, they're treating what is already in the brain by boosting what's called the reuptake of those chemicals that are already in the brain. But if your gut's not manufacturing these chemicals, that could be the precursor. And this is what I'm trying to work with everyone tonight. I want you to get this. It could be the precursor. The factory in the gut is not generating, it's not manufacturing these feel-good chemicals to even get them to the brain. Now, on my post, you've seen some of this, and I'm not trying to replace any testimony that a licensed psychiatrist could offer, and I work with so many. And I'm extremely affiliated with the Amen Clinic, where we are working with licensed psychiatrists, but also in neuroscience. So we're looking at the brain. I'm coming in with gut labs. We can run blood work, and we also have licensed people who are previous medical doctors who became licensed psychiatrists, and we put all this information together. And when we put it together, we create a package of wellness. So in my wheelhouse, being a clinical case manager, driving this 360 effect of trying to get all these pieces built, where it could be any one of my 7 buckets: biological, psychological, social, spiritual, functional, structural, occupational insults to the body can cause this. So the precursor is A. Precursor is synonymous to the word antecedent. The antecedent, what came first? So the antecedent came first, then the behavior, which is the manifestation, or it could be the symptoms, and then we have last, which is the consequence. We hope that the consequence is then considered the intervention. But let me give you another way of looking at it. We have a precursor. Let's say a person's not developing enough serotonin in the gut. Well, serotonin is not only a neurotransmitter, but also a hormone. So it can affect your sleep. So if you're not producing enough vitamin B, specifically B12, vitamin B is the precursor to serotonin. Well, now you don't have enough serotonin, so you're feeling anxious. So if you're feeling anxious and you're not getting enough serotonin to the brain, And let's say it also is affecting your hormonal levels of serotonin. So now you're not able to produce enough melatonin. So vitamin B is precursor to serotonin. Serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. Think about how many of us just go out and we buy melatonin to just fall asleep. But if your precursor, sleep is the behavior. What's the precursor? It could be serotonin. Well, let me go back. If sleep is the behavior, it could be melatonin. The precursor could be serotonin, or it could be vitamin B. So we need to investigate that. So, it's critical that we look. It's important that we assess. We have to dive in and try to figure out, like, hey, what's going on with this person, and why aren't they sleeping? Now, when I get those measures and those levels, and they're fine, and I'm thinking, wow, this person is producing enough of these feel-good chemicals and hormones in the gut, in the body, to make it to the brain. So why is the person still not sleeping? So then I take another investigative look, because I have 7 buckets to dive through. Here's another reason. Another reason could be on the top bone on your neck, called your C1, is your atlas. It's the only movable skeletal function of your neck. And this little atlas that weighs 2.5 ounces moves, and it's what your head rotates on. Very common from people getting whiplash, just playing a sport, even diving in a pool, headbutting a soccer ball, let alone football, MMA fighting, fell off your skateboard or whatever, can actually turn that bone and cut off your lymphatic system, where now you're not getting blood flow to the brain, and you're not getting cranial cervical fluid to leave the brain. So these vessels are on both sides of the atlas. So you have blood coming in, cranial cervical leaving, getting rid of toxicity from your brain. It's very common that people who don't sleep well because their atlas is out of alignment, and it's not a chiropractor that cracks your neck that fixes that. It's an atlas orthogonal junction chiropractor or clinician that actually fixes that, and it's done with a atlas orthogonal adjustment machine. So the reason why I bring that up is this is why, again, I'm telling you why it's so important that we assess. It's so important is we just don't claim that the person is mentally ill. I can tell you right now, in my practice, I have, easily a dozen people. I'm going to say probably closer to 24 people that my clinicians who specialize in atlas orthogonal treatment have fixed, who had all mental health symptoms, mental illness symptoms, brain health symptoms. So you notice I'm categorizing them all together because I respect all the professions that use functional integrative instruments, or even the DSM-5 if you're a licensed psychologist. So had the symptoms of anxiety, depression, they looked bipolar, they were acting psychotic, and the behavior was very behaviorally health driven, which means, and this is what I'm teaching you, because the neck was out of alignment and the brain was not getting enough blood, nor was it releasing toxicity, there were behavioral manifestations. People acting really intense and fired up. And this is the point that you have to really try to digest, to understand. And it's not because I'm the stress guy, but the body now is enduring stress. And the consequence, A plus B equals C. A, the atlas is off. B, the person is now not sleeping well and has all these mental health, mental illness, behavioral health symptoms, and then or functional brain health symptoms. And the consequence then becomes, for a number of the people that I've treated, the consequences become they've acted radical and got in trouble with the police. They have lost their jobs. They're walking around, major symptom, foggy brain. It's probably the most common, besides sleep disruption. Meanwhile, I had a client who didn't even realize he ever had a neck injury, who's been with this for 40 years. He's had the same toxicity in his brain for 40 years. And we dated it all the way back to where he fell in college drunk and didn't even remember it because he was intoxicated. It was a friend of his, who's still a friend 40 years after college, who gave me this testimony and said, as being part of the intake, hey Buzz, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I remember when Rob fell and hit his head on the curb when he was 19 years old. This poor guy has been living with a neck that has been out of alignment with all this toxicity. And if you watch on YouTube, Jim McMahon, who played quarterback for the Bears in the Super Bowl many years ago, he himself, although has concussions, had learned that it was Atlas orthogonal junction syndrome that he was suffering. And once they moved that bone, which takes a millisecond with a push of a button with a little metal device that actually vibrates, all that toxicity left his brain. Unfortunately for him, it actually also caused dementia. So I want everyone to think that the A plus B equals C. There's an antecedent, there's a behavior, there's a consequence. So these different definitions can alter a little bit if you're a board certified behavioral analyst to being a functional integrative behavioral practitioner, or whether you're a licensed psychologist, even if you're a licensed clinical social worker, an LPC. So no one's wrong. What I'm hoping everyone gains from this is let's investigate you. Let's find out what's going on so we can find out what's wrong. Now, I had a couple questions that came across, and I wrote down some notes because I didn't want to forget some of the questions. So I'm trying to address those questions the best that I can through anything that's coming up on my phone right now, as well as some of the notes of things that people have asked in the past. So I do have somebody, although not related to this, but I did suggest to them that I would answer it on this Instagram Live, which was about, does the gut have anything to do with diabetes? And the answer is, yeah, it has everything to do with diabetes. It can have a lot to do with diabetes. We see it all the time. So the gut, if you follow my posts, if you haven't gone through I don't even know how many there are. It's probably a couple hundred, I would only assume. And I have somebody just hit me up. So it's, I don't know if it's Jeannie Minjin, if that's how you say it, or Jeanne Minjin. She says, my last name's Minjin too, are we related? So we may be related. We'll have to check that out. Let's find out, right? And what I want you to think about for these people that have this concern if they may have diabetes is that when we're looking at people's guts, we're always looking at what they put in their gut. So I have a recent post. I did this four-part series. I don't think they've all come out yet, but what you're going to hear is number one intervention is, what are you putting in your mouth? So you're putting tons of carbs in your mouth. Tons of carbs. All right, ready? Somebody says, best brain doctor in the world. Love you, Buzz. Love you. I think that's Zach. Love you, Zach. So thank you for being an ambassador of the brain health world and gut health. So let me share with you, in the world of, we're talking insulin, we're talking diabetes. I have some notes here. So picture this if you're a carb eater, carb junkie. So you eat too many carbohydrates and your blood sugar spikes. So we don't want your blood sugar to necessarily spike. So we want to eat, tell everyone, eat on a schedule. Prepare your meals ahead of time. Meal prep. And look to do 7 to 9 cups of greens a day. Please, guys, I'm begging you, 7 to 9 cups a day. You need this, and you will feel full. All my high profilers, and I don't have to tell you names because 99% of them, I can't tell you names because I have really strict non-disclosure agreements. But some of you guys have seen some of the people I work with on the internet and such. We're talking Super Bowl champions, entertainers, just big people. This is what I give them. Everyone can be doing this. This is not huge money. This is all about planning. So in your planning, eating carbs around the clock is not planning, right? It's gluttonous, but it might be hard for you because you have so much yeast and candida overgrowth in your gut that it's craving this stuff. So you can't slow yourself down. So I feel for you. I get it. And I was there once before. But once you get that blood sugar spike, your pancreas makes tons of insulin to bring down the enormous surge of glucose in your system. So this puts stress on your pancreas. So now we have bodily stress. Once you get bodily stress, oxidative stress, your body relies on the reserves. We're talking cellular reserves. Your cells are supposed to come in. It's almost like being in a desert and your parched, right? You've already sweat all your hydration out of your body. Now you rely on your canteen. Your canteen is like your cellular reserves. Once your reserves, your cells are depleted, you have nothing left. So your canteen is empty. So your pancreas right now is stressing as a result of this. So you have blood sugar spike, pancreas is stressed. Now, because you have so much insulin is circulating, the blood sugar now drops much too low, leading to a crash. Now the adrenals pump out cortisol and maybe even adrenaline to keep you moving. This is a major problem because once you get that surge of cortisol, you're getting that glucose spike and your adrenals coming in to back it up. That's your last reserve that you have, but puts you in a fight or flight, guys. This is where people act out. They're very extreme. This is where I have clients who have this, what's called the adrenal loop. They have this vicious loop, almost always diagnosed as bipolar. Come on, not everyone's bipolar. You can have a mood fluctuation and not be freaking bipolar. I mean, come on. Even if you meet the criteria, this is why we investigate. First thing I ask, what do you put in your mouth? Everyone knows that. Everyone knows. I start there. I got to eliminate things. This person here gets that boost and they feel like Superman. Now we have a problem because as the adrenals put the liver on high alert, it starts breaking down muscle to convert to glucose. So now all your systems in your body, your gut is worn out, your adrenals are go, fire up, go, and they get really ramped up. We've all been there, quite honestly. I mean, if anyone says, I don't remember ever being there, you need counseling because you're in denial. So we've all been there. We've all had this. Come on. Couple drinks, go to Dunkin' Donuts late at night, eat 4 or 5 donuts. Bam, you're ready to stay up for another 3 or 4 hours and drink another 10 beers. Come on. So then the last thing that happens is all your organs are overworked trying to keep you functioning in a sea of blood sugar chaos. This is the process that leads to polycystic ovary syndrome, or it could lead to insulin resistance and even diabetes. So even diabetes. People that have stress commonly are at risk for diabetes because you're getting constant. Every time you get stressed, you have a stress signal that comes in. That's the antecedent. The signal comes in. What's the behavior? The behavioral reaction, the stress reaction, because you got that boost of glucose that went into the bloodstream. So your boss is giving you a hard time. That's the antecedent. Now your behavior is, F you, man. I'm going to freaking grab you and throw you around this office. That's the behavioral. Now that behavior, because it's directly tied to the anxiety or stress that was driven by the antecedent, is now by definition called a behavioral manifestation. It's not just a behavior, it's a behavioral manifestation because it's a direct result of that antecedent. Then we have the consequence. And this is where all of our sciences clinicians, I'm on the same page with you guys. I'm not saying anyone's wrong. I'm agreeing. We do this together, please. Everyone know that I am a team player. So I'm not criticizing anyone's science. But in the world of consequence, the consequence could be the person now got the cops called on them and now they're getting locked up. The consequence could be that the person got punched in the face where the boss was protecting himself and the person is hurt. The consequence could be that the person went through this really high spike and came down and crashed and is now sleeping at work. It could just be a whole number, a host of things. So the A plus B equals C is what I'm giving all of you to understand the connection between the gut and the brain, the gut and mental health, mental illness, or what we're calling today brain health. And there's all these different disciplines that we all investigate, ready, from our own disciplinary area, but we need to share that information, all of us clinicians, so we can, solve the crime, put the puzzle together. This is really, really important. And for our clients, for you out there, and I can see there's a lot of you guys, and if you have questions, just hit me with the question. I'm hoping I catch it and I can see it. I have Barb from Italy. Love you, Barb. My family's Calabrese. And we're hard-headed, right? We're Gabados. So I thank you for connecting with us from Italy. I'm sharing with you that we have to take care of our gut and structure it. Now, please understand this piece, because this is the most common uneducated complaint that I hear. Uneducated meaning you just didn't know. So I'm not picking on anybody. Uneducated complaint. Ready? Buzz, I'm eating all the right foods. I am now going green. I'm only eating meat as per your recommendation once a week. I'm organic. The meat is grass fed or it's pastured. I'm non-GMO. I have no added preservatives. There are no pesticides. There are no hormones. There are no antibiotics in anything I eat. Everything is as straight as it could be and as healthy as it could ever be. And I'm still feeling these symptoms. So common one could be, I'm still feeling like, I'm urinating like around the clock. I'm getting angry, like fired up around the clock. I'm still not sleeping. I'm still extremely anxious. Most common, ready? I eat the simplest thing and I still get bloated. Most common. I feel depressed. I have foggy brain. I can't get up in the morning. I go to sleep and I want to sleep for the next 4 days. I can't resist a sugar urge. I can't resist salt. I can't resist starches. I just had somebody the other day that says, I'm Italian. I eat pizza 3 times a day. I said, sir, that is no excuse. You can't eat pizza 3 times a day. Fast food, which is all omega-6, inflammatory, man. You're gonna die young from this stuff. We want to make sure that if your eating has historically been bad, eating right, I'm saying this from my heart. Everyone knows I'm very heart-driven, but I'm also very truthful. From my heart, I'm so proud of you if you brought it together and you're on this trajectory. And if you want more meal prepping plans and stuff from me, DM us. We'll put them together. As a matter of fact, we're looking to put a chef's kitchen together just so we can build these things out for you guys and do posts on them and stuff. My goal is to get everyone better. But I have to share with you, if your gut is wrecked, it is wrecked, unbalanced, has infection, has candida or yeast overgrowth, fungus, mold. There's all these things that could be in there. Just eating healthy is not necessarily going to correct that. So I'm glad you're eating healthy from this point forward. That point forward is called the trajectory. And as you eat meal prep, we call this scaffolding. So you're building on yesterday's plan, right? So we schedule that. Scheduling is a structural intervention. It's one of my 7 buckets. We schedule it because people function better. Another one of my 7 buckets. They function better anatomically. Anatomical means biological. Another one of my 7 buckets. Because if you're scheduled on a trajectory that is scaffolded, and it's with all the right ingredients, you will biologically be healthier, so you are psychologically well. So you would have great mental health, great brain health, or not suffer a mental illness, if you will. So what does that mean? We still got to go back and get rid of the stuff that's in your gut that's still going to affect you. It says, how do you get rid of all the yeast if you have it? This is from Kelly. So Kelly, great question. So I use a number of products, but I'm going to tell you, before I get into those products, man, first thing we want to do, Kelly, is we have to test you. We could test you with an organic acid test. And they're not thousands of dollars, they're hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but I'm going to beg you to get it done. Save money, put on a credit card. I run them for all my family members, mom, dad, sister, all my wife, my kids, you name it, boyfriends, girlfriends of my children. They'll all tell you, come into my house, we're checking you out, man. I want to know what you got in you. And with the results of that, Kelly, we can find out exactly what's going on inside your gut. Now, here's a big one, Kelly, that people have to understand, including yourself, and I'm so glad you were brave enough to ask that question, which is, if you don't know if you have it, you just don't know, you got to get it tested. That's number 1. Number 2, If you're not sure if you have it or not, and you're maybe on the, I don't think I do, because I have had a pretty reasonable, healthy, responsible eating structure my whole life, I would still get it done. Why, for less than $1,000, why wouldn't you want to get it done? Lastly, when we get the results, it really tells us the most fascinating information. But I'm going to tell you the information that is most valuable to me, which are these metabolite markers, these stress markers. It really explains a whole heck of a lot of why people walk around stressed out, thinking they have anxiety, to the point where they're so stressed, they went through the alarming stage of stress, which looks anxious, to the tired and wired stage, which looks very bipolarish. You can't sleep, but yet you're exhausted. And then you're all ramped up, but you're exhausted. Like, you're just fired up, and then your mood's fluctuating, but you're exhausted, right? And then you go into chronic fatigue, or what we call chronic stress. And people get all kinds of misdiagnoses. But what we learn from that is where your reserves are. Because if your cellular reserves could be damaged. I get people that have mitochondria damage. I mean, we're talking the cells are like, it was a grape, it is now broken down into, it looks less than a raisin with no protein and no water in it. So we can rebuild these things, but we have to know what we're trying to rebuild. So as part of that, everybody, I want you to think about, assessing as one. My team and I are putting together a couple cool plans for all of you. I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of these Instagram lives to keep educating you week to week. I have another one coming up next week. Please look out to see what the title is, see if it relates to you. If not, listen, watch it anyway, because you can help somebody else. And then lastly, to walk you through the process of trying to get you guys cleaned up or cleaned out. If your gut is unbalanced, I'm telling you, the factory that manufactures the feel-good chemicals, that's the layman's way of saying your serotonin, your dopamine, your GABA, those important chemicals. If your gut is really not in alignment, and particularly if it's extremely unhealthy, the chances of your factory being able to, in your gut, being able to produce those is just not likely. And I know that even causes more stress for you guys, because now you're doing the right thing. I'm not saying it's too late to keep doing the right thing. I'm proud of you guys. I love that. But we have to go back and find out what's in there. I mean, we don't know what we're going to find, right? So Kelly comes back. I follow another doctor that talks about the soil we grow our food in is affecting us. That is absolutely true. How much do you think soil plays a part in eating most plant-based? So the soil has lost its nutrition over the last 50 years. Guys, look this up. It's fascinating stuff. That doctor is right, Kelly. Tell me who it is, because I would love to give him a high five. He's right. The soil's shot. Our soil is shot. So because the soil is shot, now they have to keep putting fertilizers and pesticides, but that's some of the reason why it's shot, why it's so bad. And what happens is, if you don't get organic, you're eating particularly fruits and vegetables that have fertilizer. What do you know what's in fertilizer, guys? It's all carcinogenic. Pesticides, carcinogenic. We don't need that. Here's one for you. In my backyard, which I'm looking at right now, I don't have it fertilized. I don't put any pesticides or anything on it, because that's where my dogs run around. I don't want my dogs running around on a fertilizer, pesticide, grass, where they then come in the house and they're washing themselves, licking this off, and then they get cancer. Plus, my dogs are always on my bed. I don't want them on my bed where now my dog will get on the pillows sometimes, where now I'm sleeping with cancer, right? I don't need that. So Kelly is right, because the doctor is right. Our soil is really, really bad shape, And that's why they keep boosting our soil with all kinds of things to try to enrich it. So it's a vicious cycle. That's what caused the soil to go bad. And now we continue to damage it. So organic, I know it's more expensive, but it's less expensive than, healthcare, paying to get chemotherapy and all kinds of treatment and stuff, guys. I'm being straight with you. And I love plant-based. Kelly, you're right on plant-based. I can't emphasize that enough. So I had a group of doctors recently really give me a hard time on plant-based, which is interesting, because as much as they were giving me a hard time on this, they continuously refer me their clients. How about that? Knowing that I put their clients on plant-based, meals, meal prepping and stuff. I'm not saying you can't have fish. Love fish. But on another Instagram Live, I'll go through the whole fish thing. There are fish that are at risk for high levels of mercury, that are fish that are farm raised, that have crazy levels of antibiotics and steroids in them. So I can share with you how that works, because if you're eating the fish and that stuff's in the fish, you're eating that, right? But these doctors were really upset because these clients they were actually all doing really well, and they were shocked. So the doctors got on Zoom with me and they're like, why are these clients doing so well? And I said, well, let me tell you what I'm doing with their, what they're eating and their supplementation. So it's not just plant-based, Kelly, just so you know. What they were arguing with me about was, how are you only plant-basing them right now? Now, that's not forever. For the first 3 months, I'm like, we're doing plants. I call it greens. It could be broccoli, asparagus, anything that's green only. And a lot of it I like to cook. So easier to digest. These people are all thriving. So these doctors weren't able to help them, so they sent them to me, and we're doing great. And I'm sharing the client with the other doctors. So as they're beating me up about greens, they're saying, we don't agree with you. We're for the first 90 days of just greens. And I said, why? They said, because our clients need protein. And I said, there's plenty of protein, doc. There's like 4 doctors. Docs, there's plenty of protein. And they all argued with me. No, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. And I said, why am I wrong? And they said, you get your protein through chicken. You get your protein through beef, through pork. All right, so I said, well, if you're getting your protein through chicken, what do chickens eat? I said, they eat feed. They're not eating meat. I said, let's go better. The biggest mammals on our planet, strongest, badass, tough, right? Gorillas, steer, bison or buffalo, cows. What am I missing? Pigs. But let's even go hippos. What do they all eat? They eat grass. So if they're the strongest living mammals on our planet and they're eating grass, we don't have to go through that mammal to get to those proteins. We can go directly to the protein, right? And this is a whole nother training I would love to do for you guys. And it's such a great question from Kelly. And with that being said, I'm always recommending 7 to 9 cups of those greens a day. However you want to get it, however you want. Put it in smoothies is always great. Love that. Another question that came up was cow's milk. Do I believe in cow's milk? We bypass cow's milk. Dairy is not the best for you. You can look it up. It's a protein called casein or casein. I've heard people pronounce it both ways. I'm not quite sure, but it doesn't really agree with people. It's as radical as gluten is for people. Now, does that mean that some people can tolerate and some people can't? Here's what I want you to know about tolerating. When you have food sensitivities, let's pretend one of you are able to tolerate spackle. You know what you use on a wall to fill a hole? Let's pretend miraculously your body can digest spackle. Should you eat spackle because it's digestible? Well, that's gluten. That's what casein is of cow's milk. Some people, I guess, are breaking it down, but it's just not worth it. That's why I recommend almond milk. If you want it, anyone that I have that's playing, NFL, NBA, MLB, who's on a stage singing, dancing, they're operating on patients, they're attorneys handling multi-gazillion-dollar cases. These people, these high performers, I'm telling you what we do for them. This is what I do for them. I have them on, almond milk, coconut milk, everything's organic, grass-fed. Just follow my posts. I'm pushing this stuff as fast as I can. I want you guys to just be healthy, man. I want you guys to be parasympathetic, functioning people who are just calm, where you can digest your food, which we're going to get into. I'm going to do a video on digestion or an Instagram live to show you how important when your stomach blows up and you say, like my family used to say before I knew better, look how full we are, right? In Italian, we say, "Io mangiato assai." Look how my stomach is full. And in reality, it's not that it was full is why it blows up. It's inflammation. So, and then your joints hurt and stuff. We don't want that. So to bypass, things that could just be dangerous or you can't digest is just the right thing to do. Make sure your hydration is up. Clinicians who are following me, I see some of the names. I know some of you are clinicians. Clinicians, hydrate your clients. I can't express enough how critical, how important. First time meeting any of my new clients, if I do an intake, my intakes are anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, could take 2 to 3 days, believe it or not. I break it into separate days. I don't do the hour thing. And that long intake, first question on there is, how much water do you drink? I have so many people that have been in and out of hospitals that are just dehydrated. Their bodies the adrenal glands are firing off cortisol, giving these stress reactions, glucose burning through their bloodstream, right? Trying to give them strength to survive because they're dehydrated. So when we look, going back to the point, difference between mental health and mental illness, here we go. This is the summary of what I'm saying. You could have great mental health and still be mentally ill. What does that mean? You might have great cortical function. You might have a great healthy lifestyle. You may be a person that is the healthiest person on you are the healthiest guy ever, but you actually are a person who just doesn't produce enough serotonin in the body, or it produces in the body and it makes it through the blood-brain barrier into the brain, and your presynaptic nerve doesn't send enough serotonin over the synapse to make it to the postsynaptic nerve. So you need a reuptake inhibitor to make that serotonin reuptake. So you're the healthiest person ever. Your hydration, your meal prepping, you have no stress, your sleep is great, your minerals, your vitamins, you have no oxidative biomarkers going on, you have no candida, no bacteria, or all your bacteria is balanced, you have no infection, you have nothing to worry about. There's no mold, there's no parasites, but yet you have a mental illness. That can happen. It could be the other way around. How about that? You could not have a mental illness, and meanwhile, you're up all night. I'll give you an example. I had a client, he was up all night. He's an attorney. He was up all night playing video games. Craziest thing, this situation. He would get up at 5:30 in the morning, drink 3 Red Bulls every morning. Then he would have, I measured this, I followed him one day, 11 cups of coffee before lunch and never ate breakfast. He took 80 milligrams of Adderall every morning and never ate food until dinner time while he was at his office, and it was always pizza. Is he mentally ill? Or does he have health problems that are affecting his mental status? And I deemed him as being a mentally ill person based on being or having bad mental health. I said, you have all the symptoms, anxiety, depression, bipolar, but you have health problems. You're just unhealthy. You have an unhealthy work style, unhealthy lifestyle. So I tried to meal prep him and help him, and he was a bust. I couldn't get him to break stride. He didn't want to undo his routine. He just, and truthfully, the cortisol will kill him. And he even has that little tire here because the glucose, his cortisol levels are high for so often that it's has so much sugar in his bloodstream that he's got this, what we call the cortisol tire. He's skinny otherwise, but he's got the tire. So that's how I know that he's always stressed out. So this is the best. I love doing live anything, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, whatever. I love having people ask me questions. I want everyone to be healthy. I want the world to be appreciative of the resources that we do have. It's very unfortunate. It really is disappointing that it costs more money to eat healthy, at least in America. We put out more money to pay for organic food and just healthy food than to pay for bad food that's just not good for you. And lastly, I hope one of my 7 buckets is spiritual. I have somebody just hit me with, this is fit man, fit body. Do I believe in Satan? Let me come back to you on that, man, on my spiritual. We'll do one of the 7 buckets is spiritual, and it doesn't always mean religious, but I would love to answer that. And another one is, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. This is another doctor that I follow. Yeah, there's really good people out there. I mean, you have Dr. Gundry. I work with his team. He's a great guy, super smart. Does diabetes, can it link with mental health? It can. But this is my point. Ready? Last question. Does diabetes link with mental health? Health means wellness in functional medicine. All right, so let's stop there. So if it means wellness, let's call it mental wellness. So if you're taking in tons and tons of carbs and your insulin levels are dysregulated, you're going to have higher levels of cortisol. Your hormones are going to be off balance. Your body's going to be surging with erratic flows of blood sugar that is not going to allow you to be well. Could you have mental health symptoms as a result of that? Hell yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So can they be all connected? Yes, your gut, your endocrine, and your brain is the triangle effect. They're all looped together. And do I believe you can heal yourself with positive energy? Yes, that's part of my spiritual bucket. We're going to hit that. I'm glad you guys are bringing this stuff up because I want to hit the spiritual bucket, which is your value system and what you believe in. So listen, thank you everybody for staying with me. Thank you for following me. You know, as you can see, I'm not dancing on Instagram. You know, I'm posting things I just want people to learn. I'm posting things I want you to embrace. I'm posting responsible details that I want people to, utilize. And I just appreciate everyone's support. You guys have been amazing. Hit me with your questions. I'm going to be doing another Instagram live literally next week. We'll be posting what that topic is. I really don't mind that you guys are hitting me with some other questions because I know you want my attention. I'm good like that. Let's stick together. Individually, we survive, but as teams, we thrive. And thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.